This year's theme for International Social Work Day is respecting diversity through joint social action. Professor David Shemmings looked at this theme through the lens of his areas of study, trauma and child protection. These two issues are at the core of what social workers everywhere deal with on a daily basis.
Today we're looking at two things. One, the theme of the day, particularly the afternoon, is diversity, and I'm bringing some ideas from my experience and experience around Europe, particularly around what do we really think child protection practice can do to help understand diversity. And that's to do with the relationships that social workers have with the people they work with and for. I'll be looking at things like unconscious bias, and trying to get a kind of a reflective process in their minds of, oh yes, I'd never thought of that. This morning, and it's connected, is looking at what does trauma mean, and particularly what it doesn't mean. Because many of the people that social workers come into contact with will have experienced trauma. Not just them, lots of people have experienced trauma, and we look today at two different kinds, what's called event-based trauma, where there's a car accident or some dreadful event, like I gave the example of the Westminster bombing and Grenfell Tower, and relationship-based trauma, where basically a child has been traumatised by the people who are meant to love them, and that can set off a whole series of complexities, which social workers come along and are usually very good at helping with. But they need to be able to understand what the science is, what the practice wisdom is behind that.
The professionals say it's been really interesting to hear from Professor Shemmings. He highlights that social work is always evolving, and it's important to keep up to date with the latest research. The issues people face are always changing, and that applies in Gibraltar too.
So we're finding, for example, in the UK, and I'm sure it's true across the world, that as a result pretty much of COVID, many children, not all, I'll come to that, are finding that they are really struggling at school. They're unfamiliar with things, but there's a group of children who didn't like school in the first place. So in some respects, they quite liked the idea of being at home, but because children were not visible, it's made abuse go up. Because they've been at home, when they go to school, teachers see them when they get changed for PE, games, etc., and they're in contact with others and they notice changes. But if they're at home all the time, then that makes it more difficult to kind of, in an appropriate way, keep an eye on.
Well, Gibraltar, like in every other jurisdiction, there can be a pocket of social issues that social workers deal with. And I think the professor touched upon some of the themes that emerged from the pandemic. And that resonates with us here in Gibraltar, where we have issues of domestic abuse and substance misuse and child abuse. So those are the core fundamental issues that social workers and counsellors work with on a daily basis.
The day's events concluded with closing words from the Minister for Social Services and a certificate presentation. Before the end, the group was asked to take a moment to clap for the hard work that social workers in our community do.